So hi everyone, welcome to LEAD, Organizing Skills for Grassroots Advocates. I am Ari Conrad, Manager of Grassroots Advocacy here at NCJW in our national office in DC. I use they, them pronouns, and I will be managing this training and participating a little bit, and I'm also joined by Lindsay Morris, who will be helping with the back end work. So if you have any technical issues throughout, feel free to ping either one of us, and we will try and assist. We are very excited to have everyone joining us today. LEAD is our monthly advocacy webinar series where we focus on a new skill each month. It's every Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and we always record the trainings. So don't worry if you miss any of them, you can always check out the recording, and we'll send out the recording of this in our follow-up email. While most months are 60-minute trainings, this month we are very excited to have a little bit more time together at 90 minutes. To dive into some leadership development skills. A few housekeeping notes. I have folks muted right now when you enter. We'll have time to talk and to share stories and to introduce ourselves, but when you're not speaking, please make sure that you're muted. And if you have any questions or anything in the meantime, feel free to drop them in the chat box. It should have popped up for you, but it'll also pop up when I drop in these notes in a few minutes. And we'll have some time throughout and at the end to answer any questions. Throughout, if you're having any issues, please reach out to me or Lindsay Morris. We'll include our emails as well, and we'll try and troubleshoot, but please note that we have a little bit of limited capacity while the webinar is running. And we are recording the webinar, so you can go back and rewatch anything that you see as well, and we'll send out all of the handouts in the follow-up email. So without further delay, I will introduce our facilitator this month. We are thrilled to have Jeannie Appleman, who's the Senior Organizer and Trainer at Join for Justice, be joining us again to talk about this really incredible, how do we take action, how do we motivate others to take action with us, and how do we build our teams in really meaningful ways. And she has joined us for 2 other trainings before this. So be sure to check back on our recordings and you can see the other conversations that she's led with us. So without further wait, I will kick it off to Jeannie.
Thank you. It's so great to be back with NCJW Women Leaders. Yay! So since it's a small enough group, we'll just do a quick round. If you tell me your name and what city you're in, that would be really helpful. So who wants to start?
This is Ruth. My name is Ruth Seidelman. I'm from Bergen County, New Jersey.
Great.
My name is Rita Rum. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay, great. Welcome.
I'm Beth Natchberg from Chicago.
Okay, great.
I'm Leslie Frost from Maryland.
Mm-hmm. Where in Maryland?
Bethesda, Maryland.
Bethesda, great, thanks.
This is Melissa Markman from Austin, Texas.
Hi. Great.
I'm Joni Hunn, and I'm in the Greater Washington Action Team, but I'm in Virginia.
Nice. Good. You look familiar. I think we've met either on webinar or somewhere. Who else? Is that everybody? Great. Well, I'm thrilled to be with you all today, and we're going to go on a little journey here in these next 90 minutes. We're going to really focus on leadership, right? So how do we know we found a leader? What does a leader look like? And I don't mean hairstyle. We're going to look at how do you actually proposition a leader in a way that they're going to want to say, yes, whatever you need me to do. Is that Arlene?
Yes.
Okay, good, great. And we're going to model it for you. Ari and I are going to do a little modeling, and then we're going to give you a chance. We're going to put you into a chat room briefly, and you'll have a chance to practice with another leader. So, in the beginning of this webinar, I'd like you to be thinking a little bit about somebody who you can practice with another person on the Zoom, a leader that you've been wanting to proposition and haven't yet. So I want you to be thinking about that throughout. So I'm an organizer and a trainer for, wow, more than 25 years now. And so that tells you how old I am, turned 60 this year. And the way I like to do webinars like this is to be very interactive, right? So this is not a presentation as much as it is a conversation that we can have together. And so I'm going to ask you questions, and I'm going to expect you to to jump in and answer them, right, out of your own experience, because that's going to make it a rich experience for everybody. So I became a Jew and an organizer out of the same set of experiences. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up working class, Catholic, very religious, very traditional in South Bend, Indiana, many years ago. And it was experiences of powerlessness that I had both in my family, my dad almost losing his job, and then me and several other girls in our neighborhood being victimized. These experiences would have led me to be a victim my whole life. But I have to tell you, organizing saved me. And I know that sounds dramatic, but it's true. Organizing is very much about me feeling powerful when I help other people feel powerful. So building organizations that wield power like NCJW nationally does and locally, I can't think of a more exciting group of people to relate to help myself feel powerful. So that's why I'm here today. So we're going to start with a question that I have for you, which is, have you ever had somebody proposition you in a way that just felt so generic, that felt like, wow, they don't know me at all, or else they wouldn't be asking me to do this thing? So I want to hear from you a minute about whether you've been in that situation before, and what does it feel like when somebody propositions you without bothering to get to know you? Who wants to share a story?
I feel like they don't necessarily care.
Yeah, exactly. It's about the task to be done. It's not about you or your development, right? Anybody want to share something specific?
Well, yes, this is Rita. When I'm asked to head up a fundraising event and I'm an activist, it's so not me.
Yeah.
My skills are adapted elsewhere, and yes, it shows they know diddly squat about me.
That's right. It doesn't endear you to the organization, right? I remember about, I don't know, it's been almost 10 years since my husband and I and daughter moved to this neighborhood we're in, and we go to a Young Israel synagogue. And it's a great synagogue now, but when I first moved into the neighborhood, it was like I was here like 2 days literally in the neighborhood. And I get a phone call from the head of Sisterhood asking me to become a co-president of Sisterhood. Now, mind you, I hadn't even gone to shul yet. And I'm like, okay. I said, well, why me? And she said, well, you know, I heard you're an organizer. I said, yeah. She goes, well, we need an organizer. I said, all right. And I don't know what possessed me to say yes, but I did. And I actually left after 2 months because I realized that I didn't know anything about this synagogue and its membership, and they certainly didn't know how I operate. So whoever has a phone ringing, if you could mute it, that'd be great. So it was a complete mismatch, right? And so that's kind of our culture, I think, in many of our institutions in America today, right? It's about how can I spend the least amount of energy actually involving people, right? So I'm going to go to Facebook and I'm going to try to recruit through Facebook instead of seeing it as more of a tool to get information out. I'm going to email somebody instead of calling them because it takes less time and it takes less out of me. And that's like the opposite kind of attitude, right? That we need to have if we really want to engage leaders. So when we want to engage leaders, we want to do it in a very personal way, right? So who are we looking for when we're looking for leaders? Like when you think about trying to get somebody to be a leader in your organization, who are you looking for? Like, how would you define who you're looking for to become a leader?
This is Ruth. I would say someone that demonstrates an interest in whatever it is that we need a leader for.
Right.
Whether it's for fundraising, I need a leader. I need someone to head up fundraising. I want someone who has a penchant for doing that. If it's someone for advocacy, I want to see somebody. I want to feel that this is where their heart is, so it becomes less of a chore and more of a passion.
That's right. You're looking for passion in people, right? Ari, could you put up the handout on traits of a leader? Ari's going to share a screen with us so that you can all be looking at this handout with me. Great. Yeah, so, you know, you're looking for somebody who has an appetite, like Ruth was saying, you know, somebody that's willing to take some initiative, right? You're looking for somebody who has a track record of doing, not just coming to meetings or having good ideas, right? Not that people with good ideas are not important. You need people to do that too, but you're really looking for people who, given the opportunity, they're going to act as opposed to sitting back and waiting for somebody else to do it, right? Have you ever had that experience of being in a committee meeting where everybody's going blah, 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 and then when it comes time at the end for people to actually take on assignments, it's dead silence, right? Nobody wants to step up. That's not who you're looking for, right? You're looking for people who are jumping out of their chairs ready to say, yeah, I'll try that. Somebody who's relational and accountable, right? So Lone Rangers are not leaders. Why do you think Lone Rangers wouldn't make a good leader?
They don't enlist others.
They don't enlist others. They often do not have a following and they don't know how to create one, right? So you're looking for people who actually have relationships and they're not so egocentric that they can't take some feedback or be held accountable for goals that they make, right? You're looking for leaders who have a network of relationships, right? That she or he can activate, or at least have the beginnings of that, right? Sometimes I have found that sometimes you'll find a potential leader who is relational but hasn't figured out yet who their peeps are, right? They haven't figured out who their following is, and sometimes being part of an organization like NCJW, this can be a huge growth opportunity for them to actually learn how to create a network. I think this next one, taking risks, if I had to say after all the organizing I've done in my life, this to me is probably the most important trait of a leader, right? What happens when you're not willing to take risks?
You get the same old result.
You get the same old results, same old, and nothing changes. And new people don't want to come and be part of it because they see it as a stagnant organization, right? So living with conflict and tension, that doesn't mean you want somebody who's difficult to work with, right? Or argumentative all the time. But what happens when we don't allow for some tension or conflict within, especially when you're maybe making a really important decision together about the organization? What happens when you don't allow for some tension?
There's no growth.
There's no growth. Again, stagnation, right? We've had a couple other people join us. Yeah? Who is FPEL plus that whole configuration that's joined us? FPEL plus.
It's
yeah.
me, it's Patty Weber.
Hi, Patty. Welcome. We have a Robin now. Were you on before? I don't think so. And Tasneen. Yeah, good. We have some new folks too. So what we're doing is we're going over the traits of a leader here. The final one I think about is a leader is clear about her own self-interests, right? Because a lot of what recruiting and propositioning leaders is about is understanding what are the full range of their self-interests, their hopes and dreams, their challenges, their talents, right? Because like Ruth said at the beginning, we want to get people working to their strengths, right? To what they're passionate about. So in order for us to be effective in doing that and finding other leaders, we have to be clear ourselves, right? In what our interests are. Why are we a leader in NCJW? What are we passionate about that makes us want to be a leader in this organization? I'd love to actually hear an example of that from any of you. Why are you drawn to this great organization? Which self-interest of yours does involvement in the organization actually meet? Does anybody want to share that real quick? But not all at one time, please.
This is Ruth.
Hi, Rita. Can you hear me?
Yes, Rita. Tell us, why are you part of NCJW as a leader?
Because without coalitions, we can't get anything done. I can vote, but my vote is not enough.
Right.
So working really hard on promote the vote, protect the vote is good locally and nationally. Plus, we belong to other local coalitions who, which get lots and lots of other people registered. And so we make a much larger impact.
Exactly. Because, you know, if you look at what do you need to have power to move something? You need organized people, right? And you also need some organized money, and organizations, but for sure you need a lot of people, and you need people that have relationships and connections, right? To maybe some power people. You need folks that are affected by the issue very directly. And then you need folks, maybe that you all fall into this on some of the issues. I'm praying that none of you have ever been trafficked. But like NCJW's work on human trafficking, you know, I think of, as a woman, I think, you know, my connection to that issue is, I'm a woman. I would never want to be trafficked, and I wouldn't want my daughter to be trafficked. And so I am fairly passionate about that issue, directly out of not wanting other women to experience that, and also having been powerless before, I know what that's like. So we're always trying to find what is our personal connection to something that we are passionate about, right? Because that gives us skin in the game, ownership around something, and it gives us the credential to be in a coalition, like Rita was talking about, where you do have people who are directly affected by something. What gives you credential to be at that table is not just because you're passionate about it, but because you can articulate why you care about this so much, right? That's part of what it means to be part of a larger coalition. So I want to distinguish a minute the difference between a leader and entitled leadership, right? So if you look at the organizational structure, right, you have, well, who has power in the NCJW that you're part of locally? Where does the power lie?
This is Ruth. I don't understand the question.
Okay, who makes decisions in the organization around?
Everyone, but in my organization, everybody but the president.
Everybody but the president. That's interesting. Okay. And so what does the president do?
Well, I guess this is getting kind of personal to my section, but the former leadership in my section it has been repurposed year after year after year.
Mm-hmm.
Coming in as a relatively new person these last 2 years,
yeah,
I find that they're reticent to give up control.
Uh-huh.
And even though we work as a triumvirate, there were 3 of us, 3 co-presidents.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a very difficult uphill battle.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I said when we talked about not having any change, having that conflict, I live it like at every meeting.
Right. That is tough. It's tough to redirect or do a sea change in an organization. But what I've learned, and probably many of you have learned this, even in your professional lives outside of your work with NCJW, is that when we get inside other people's interests and what their backstory is, it often helps us to literally move the organization in different directions and move around the leaders in the organization. If a leader doesn't see it if a current positional leader doesn't see it in their interest to allow other people into that quote unquote club of leaders, then they're never going to give up that control, because that they see that control as part of what makes them a leader. So it's changing the culture inside an organization over time for everyone to see it in their self-interest, for the leadership opportunities to expand to new people. Because what happens when the same leaders lead for a long time? What happens to what happens to these leaders?
Well, I'm finding that the section becomes stagnant.
Of course it becomes stagnant, right? Because it's the same 3 people or same 2 people or whatever. And it's hard it's hard. I don't know. Have you ever been in that situation where you've been like, nobody would take over for you and you got stuck in that position and you did all the work and you burned out? You ever had that happen?
It could happen at the
Yeah.
end of this year.
Right. Yeah. I'm looking at Melissa's eyebrows and seeing that she may have been in this spot before, right? You got a story around that, Melissa?
Well, I would say we're like a little bit ahead of Ruth in terms of, and not exactly the same way, but some of that has happened in our Austin section, but in a really positive way. That we had our, I say older members, but I mean just because they've been active longer, they're not old. But they continually were rotating positions, and for whatever reason, our nominating committee a couple of years ago said we need to bring in some new people that haven't had these leadership positions, and we're at the point, but I don't think anyone was resisting it. I think they were all for it, and we really want to grow our section in bringing in a lot of younger, like 20 and 30 somethings, women that are new to the area. So we've really, I'll be going into my second year as co-president in Austin, and this past year we really focused on defining the leadership positions so that, because jokingly we'd be like, I'd be speaking to someone, I said, well, did you do that as president or did you do that as programming? And they were like, I don't know. So it's kind of, like as they would take on new positions, they weren't necessarily relinquishing older responsibilities because it's easy for them to do. And, gosh, if you're willing to do it, I'm happy to let you do it. But we really wanted to define our leadership positions this year so that, number one, when we're asking someone to take one on, we can give them a well-defined position description.
Very good.
And we've really sorted through that this past year. So starting, with our upcoming year, people really know what it is that their job is and what it isn't.
Yeah. Thank you for that, because that can be a really important thing, right? Because if people don't know what the expectations are or what their purview is, they start butting into other people's, quote unquote territory or what somebody else thinks is really their job. And that causes a lot of conflict. Or if you don't have like terms on these positions, term limits, then somebody just holds court for 10 years on that one position, right? And so look, I want to distinguish a minute with you. Positional power, right? Which is, we have invested all this power into people that only have positions, right? In some places, it's the presidents or co-presidents. In other cases, it's an exec committee. In other sections, it's a board. But that is not the only house for a leader, right? A leader is somebody with some of those traits that we were talking about that has an appetite to lead, that knows how to be a team player and build community around them and to sort of unleash the talent of other people that they're working with. But it's not about what the positional title is, right? So if you can think about leadership more fluidly, it might serve you and to rethink a little bit the structure, so that if you want an engaged section with people from all different backgrounds, with different talents and different passions, each being able to write themselves into the script of this organization. You know what I mean by that? Write yourself into the script. Feel skin in the game, feel some ownership. If that's what you're looking for, then it means we got to know who our membership is, meaning sitting down with them face to face, finding out about their backstory. I told you a little bit about my backstory, right? About why I'm an organizer. Well, and I told you that in about 30 seconds, right? Well, we're talking about sitting down with somebody and finding out what they care about. Where do they come from? What experiences shaped their passions? Why NCJW? Why are they passionate about this particular issue in NCJW, right? It's really getting inside somebody's self-interest, not pitching them generically like I talked about in the beginning, because nobody wants to work for an organization that doesn't care about who they are, who you are, right? So first we got to see that leadership is something that is there are more leadership opportunities than just positions, and even more leadership opportunities than just chairing committees, right? So leadership is there are multiple opportunities to recruit leaders to members to become leaders inside the organization. And so what are some of the roles besides the board kind of things and committee chairs? What other areas of your section can somebody step up and be a leader currently? Hello? Anybody there?
Hi,
Hi. Who's talking?
Patty.
Hi, Patty. So tell me about leadership opportunities in your section.
So we have a myriad of problems in our section, but the way we've been using leadership opportunities is by having people volunteer and participate in projects.
Mm-hmm.
I had to go to the State House the other day, and I took someone that I didn't really know,
Mm-hmm.
who was actually sort of outside the Jewish community. She's Jewish, but doesn't know a lot of Jewish people. So that was a really great opportunity to discuss and have her get more involved. But she became a leader that day because she helped me at the State House. And
how are you cultivating her now? Yeah. How are you?
So I'm cultivating her because we're actually having a timely program, and I personally invited her, and I'm trying to pull her in. But
is it around something she's interested in?
I'm trying to find out her interest. I mean, obviously she was interested in what we did at the State House, probably more. I always dread going to the State House, but I do it. But and I always land up being the one on camera for some reason once I get there. But you know, it was really nice because I actually had 30 minutes in the car with her, and I actually went through everything that you're saying. I got to know her a little more. I got to know her backstory. I got to know her interests. I got to know why she reached out. And that was a nice change for me because I'm kind of in that rut of recirculating all these people that have been involved with NCJW, but we're not able to reach out to other people.
Right. So this is a great start to that, huh? Yeah.
So I am completely cultivating this.
Good. Good.
All right, I'm going back to eating lunch, so I'm getting on camera.
That's okay. So, you know, that's a great example of a way to involve somebody that could be a leader, right? This one was clearly interested in doing that. You know, so convening meetings, whether it's for a committee, a standing committee, or maybe there's a group of you within NCJW who have been like exploring maybe bringing to the membership a particular issue that you're passionate about. So, you know, convening meetings, being able to spot somebody. It's almost like you're a talent scout when you're a leader, right? Just like what Patty was just saying. She had somebody in mind. She thought this woman might be interested, and then she gets her in a car going to the State House, and she figures out, yeah, here's some other things. So talent scouting is another thing I didn't put on that traits of a leader. But what is the hardest thing for you right now in your section to recruit leaders for? Where people are just not saying yes or they're not stepping up.
So this is Ruth again.
Mm-hmm.
We're into our, getting our new board together.
Mm-hmm.
And we have difficulty finding new people other than recycled people.
Mm-hmm. Who would be good board members.
Right.
So there's not yet a bench. You know what I'm talking about by a bench? I'm not
Yes,
such a
I
big
do. I
sports
understand entirely.
Yeah. So it's like a sports bench, right? Where you're thinking ahead down the line. Okay, who can we be cultivating now that may be ready to want to be a board member in a couple of years, right? So it's finding
Right.
people first for that bench that you can start cultivating, right? Okay, so for board membership.
And that brings me back to something you said before, where you speak to somebody like what happened to you being asked to be president without even seeing sisterhood.
Yes.
Because we get a hot body or a hot new person that maybe is a newly retired person who we know of or someone knows, right away we think that would be a person for not a chair position, but for an elected position.
Right.
And I fight with with people continuously to say, no, that's not the way. We need to bring someone onto the board.
Correct. Right. So it's finding that there's a term in organizing that we say, put somebody in the way of experience, which means you're talent scouting, you find somebody that might be a leader, you're finding out their interests, you're engaging them around their interests first, right? You're not even thinking about positions yet, right?
Right.
So it's about cultivating their interest and their connection with the organization. And it's testing them out a little bit. You know, you want to see if there's somebody that's reliable, right? Are they reliable? Do they fulfill their commitments? Do they have some of these other traits we talked about? And then you're thinking, okay, maybe they would be somebody for a position. But it's almost like you have to stop thinking about positions all the time, because that's how Jewish organizational life and just organizational life altogether in this country, we've gotten so focused on the titles and the positions that we've forgotten about what real leadership is and what earned leadership is, right? So I know that it happens sometimes. It's happened in organizations I've worked for, where we'll have a leader who's just so outstanding, but they hold all these relationships and all the information, and then something happens. There's a falling out, or they get sick, or they leave, or they whatever, and then all of that person's relationships and knowledge goes out the window. So that's not a collective leadership model. And what we're talking about is so that not one person holds everything, not one person has all the power, not one person does all the work. Have you ever been in a committee where like one person does all the work? Maybe there's 5 of you and one person does all the work. Any stories around that? Meg Goldstein is giving me a little look there that maybe she's had that experience. Let's hear about it, Meg.
Right. I mean, I think it's one of the causes of burnout.
Yeah.
But my observation would be that what happens is that the people who lead, who take responsibility for, say, doing an event or undertaking a project, very often are good at that aspect of the work, but they are not good at recruitment and cultivation.
There we go.
So, you know, they get the event done, but they haven't done anything to replace themselves. And then they complain and say, well, you know, I don't want to do this anymore, or I'm burnt out, or so you have to make sure that they're engaged in both aspects of the development cycle.
Exactly. And if your section is constantly doing talent scouting, right? So that maybe somebody is really good at leading an initiative, but they're not so good at recruitment. Maybe somebody else in the organization is really good at recruitment, that doesn't really want to sit on a committee, right? But she'd much rather make phone calls or be the welcomer at events where she gets to know people. So it's like not everybody is good at everything, right? The ideal person, of course, to chair a committee would be, or an action team, whatever you want to call it, would be somebody who both has knows how to organize something and is good at recruitment. But if you start thinking differently about how you organize the work, and what have been committees can turn into action teams. And Ari, if you would put up the handout, please, on action team versus committees. Nobody wants to join a committee anymore. Why? Because they're not run well, right? And there's not like this equal distribution of the work. You know, somebody doesn't want to chair a committee because they believe that they're going to have to do all the work, or they don't want to join a committee because they think they're going to be asked to do something that they have no interest in, right? Or aren't good at. God forbid I should embarrass myself by failing, right? So if we think about collective leadership differently in terms of if we have action teams that are based on interest, right? So that you're not trying to recruit people that are not interested in voter registration onto the voter registration committee, and you're not pitching people to work on the human trafficking issue if they're not interested in something like that. Because, you know, then they're not going to be a productive member of the small group, right, that actually gets the work done. So an action team, and we're going to send you, Ari's going to send you like a sample agenda from a action team meeting, and you'll get immediately the difference between that and what a committee usually does. But an action team functions in a way where to get onto the action team, you have to actually know that you're going to do some work, right? Because you're interested in the topic of the action team. You're going to be propositioned to be on that action team because you've identified that as an interest. You are interested in taking action on it. So therefore, it's not going to be at the end of the action team meeting, when it's clear what the next steps are and everybody stares there and looks at each other. You've been on that kind of a committee? You know, it's like a well-run meeting. Okay, this is an exciting thing that's going to happen, but guess what? Nobody raises their hand to do any of these assignments, right? Because they've gotten used to the culture of going blah, 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 blah. Here's my great idea, but they're not actually putting any effort into implementing it. So we got to shift all that. We got to go back to the John Kennedy era. Okay, now I'm really aging myself. I always screw up what he said. It's not what your country can do for you, it's what you can do for your country. Okay, that's the culture we're going back to in organizational life. So it's people are going to want to get on an action team because they're pitched to it because it's in their interest, and there's something in their talent well that they're going to be able to bring forward in that, right? But the thing doesn't go forward unless there's five people ready to actually be on that action team, right? Because otherwise it becomes this limping along, arm twisting, terrible experience for everybody on the action team or on the committee, right? Because committees can become permanent and stagnant. People can attend meetings and say they're on this committee but not do any work. One or two people do all the work, and members aren't necessarily passionate about the topic, and there's no accountability. So that's what we're trying to get rid of, committees that act like that and turn them into action teams, right? So then you can be a leader on an action team without actually having a position or a title. But what makes you a leader is that you are actually bringing your full self, right, to the work. Does that make sense to you? What do you think the chances are you could turn some of your committees into an action team? Elise.
So we did that. We've settled 2 families from the refugee families, and that was an action team. We got people that were interested in doing that, and we collected all the furniture that we needed. We also set up the apartment. We've taken the families to the doctor and to Social Security office and everything like that. So,
can you speak up a little, Elise? It's hard to hear you. Sorry.
Okay, I know. They told me that yesterday in the webinar. But anyway, we've had good luck doing things like that.
So you have an action team that's resettling refugees, and so is it that some people are doing the collecting of the furniture and other people on the action team are taking them to appointments, and so you're splitting up the work based on interest, right? And one of the things we suggest to do in the first action team meeting when you're starting to do anything is to get people to articulate why they're on that action team, right? It's connecting every member of the action team to actually what the work is of the, what the topic is, so that they'll be even more excited and inspired to do something about it, right? Okay, so anybody else on this webinar right now that have tested this out at all?
I'm fascinated by the distinction, and it's real important to get into. One of the things that really fascinates me is only is formed if there are enough leaders willing to drive it.
Yeah.
And what happens if we have an issue and no one leads it? Do we just drop it? It sounds, you know.
I'll let the NCJW national staff
Okay.
on the call actually address that. Not to put you on the spot.
Okay, maybe that's a different discussion, but
I think it's maybe you want to just take a stab at it, just clarifying, Ari, or?
Yeah, I think, so it's a multi-issue organization. There are always, like, we need to pick what we prioritize. Even at national, we know that there is massive diversity in like what our members care about and what our members take action on. Within national, we have made a decision to focus on 3 key priority areas: reproductive justice, civic engagement, and the courts. And we did that because of that issue. Like, we actually need to have enough capacity to be effective on the issues that we're going to prioritize. And so there's a little bit of that like give and take of like determining what do you prioritize, what do you take action on, knowing that we can't take action on everything all of the time because there's only so many of us.
Mm-hmm. And there may be things that are very, very local that come up in addition to the national issues, right? That you all decide that you really need to work on because it's in the interests of your community and your partners. And so that kind of multi-layer of involvement too, right? So, yeah. So have many of you been on the webinars before that, I'm trying to remember when these were, last year, where it was like how to do a one-to-one meeting or how to have relational conversations? Yeah. Those of you on today, you've been to some of those webinars? Okay, so I'm gonna make some assumptions here then based on that. So I wanna go now to then how do you proposition, if you look at this structure of leadership as something more than positions, and you're constantly talent scouting because you're trying to build up a bench of leaders that ultimately can take some of these positions on, but looking at the work of the organization as the opportunities for new leaders to step up. So that means you're gonna have to start relating to your membership in a deeper way relationally to figure out what we said earlier, what their interests are. Was it Patty, was it you that were talking about that you were kind of doing this relational meeting in the car on the way to the state capitol? Was that you?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So there's lots of different places you could do that kind of a relational conversation. You can do it in the car, you can do it at a coffee shop. But it's intentional and it's more than a schmooze, right? It's not just, you know, how old are your kids or, you know, what do you do for a living? It's deeper than that. It's understanding kind of what makes this person tick and what they're passionate about and what they struggle with, right? You know, you may find out that somebody has a child in school that's being bullied and they're like completely at a loss for how to deal with it, right? But it's making them feel powerless. And that may be the driving force why they come to NCJW. It may not be the list of issues, although they're going to get involved in the list of issues. It may be some other experience that drives them to the organization and makes them want to do advocacy and organizing. You know what I mean? So self-interest is something that's not just narrow in its definition. It's not just, okay, I'm going to get involved in NCJW's action team on voter suppression or what somebody said it earlier, or voting rights or whatever.
Vote the vote, protect the vote.
Protect the vote, thank you. Their experience may not have been around that in particular, but whatever experience they had that is driving them to want to do advocacy and organizing, you need to find out what that is, right? You need to uncover, sorry?
Okay, I want to piggyback on that when you're ready.
Go ahead.
All right, so Rita from Cleveland. We are making our bulletins more streamlined with less information, but links. So if somebody, you know, we have 1,800 members. If somebody has never been interested in one thing before, but all of a sudden we're fighting gerrymandering and we put a blurb in our article and we don't have to go into the entire definition, we put something motivational and put the link. And then they notify us and next thing you know, we have an active person who's been hanging on the sidelines, but now is a leader.
Great. That's great. So that's one way to find leaders. And and people that are interested in certain topics. And another thing I know just from having worked with NCJW for a couple of years now in different ways, that I know that you all are very interested in connecting with people who are experiencing in the moment some of the issues that you're working on. If not your own membership, others, right? Like for example, just even on that issue of gerrymandering, it would be interesting, right, to see, you know, who's most adversely affected by that, right? And getting them to come and talk to your membership, right? So research comes in a lot of forms, education comes in a lot of forms, right? And the more you can actually do in-person relationship building with people that are most affected by something, the more inspired your membership will be to do something about it, right? Because we're all moved by each other's stories much more than we are by a graph or an article. Usually it's somebody's story and how it impacts them, right? So, but it comes in all forms. So Ari, can you please put up the propositioning potential leaders format thing? So we've talked about how you got to get inside their interests, right? You got to figure out how you're going to, what are you going to engage this person around based on what they tell you? So, are you going to share the screen or, yeah. So there's sort of a step-by-step process we often talk about when we're propositioning leaders, you know, so we're not going for pitching somebody without a relationship at all, right? Because what we said in the beginning was, if you feel like you're being generically pitched for something, you don't want to do it. You're pissed off that the person hasn't even bothered getting to know what you're interested in. That's kind of the feeling that I had when that Young Israel, when the sisterhood, you know, I didn't think about it at the moment, but later I was like, well, wow, you don't know anything about me. You think that you know I'm an organizer, and then you know who I am just because of what I do. So you want to get inside who they are. So that's the first thing, right? In propositioning, you're uncovering why this thing might be of interest to them, you know? And once you find out more about that and their backstory and a little bit about their talents and their passions, then you want to talk a little bit about, and I don't have it on here, forgive me. You want to talk about what your interests are too. Like, why you're involved in NCJW and what experiences shaped that, you know, and what you're passionate about and why you're passionate about being on this particular committee that you actually want to talk to them about a little bit, or action team. So, you know, you're probing them for stories, you're telling your own stories and your passions. And then you're going to say, this is why this action team is important to me, this issue right now. And you know, we'll just use an example. So human trafficking, right? I know that the New York section had a big, you know, initiative around that. And I remember meeting one of these women in that section at the convention you all had a couple of years ago, and what was it, Atlanta? And it took me a while to get to, and it takes you a while to get to the kernel sometimes, right? When you're trying to figure out somebody. Why that was so important to her. And she talked about it in terms of having a daughter, you know, and just can only imagine what this must be like for a teenage girl to be trafficked. And and there wasn't any more direct connection than that, but it was enough for her to be very passionate about this. So you want to get to that kernel, and you want to share why it's important to you and why this issue is important to the organization, right? So because if you want somebody to write themselves into the script of the organization, you need to help them figure out how this fits in the overall vision of the organization. And so then you say, so if I was wanting to get somebody involved in the human trafficking action team, after I've shared a little bit about myself having a daughter and thinking about how awful it would be, I would find out why I knew that she was interested in this issue, because she talked to me about it at one of the events that we had. And I'd ask her, what is the talent or what contribution could you imagine making on this issue that you've told me you're passionate about? So you're probing for the particularity, for what in particular this woman or man might want to contribute or volunteer to do as part of this. And then you're saying, well, that would be really great, because actually that's exactly what we need on this action team. You know, maybe she's great at Excel sheets, and we don't have anybody that can do some of this tracking that we need to track the information on, or whatever it is. Maybe it's public speaking. We need somebody to come and speak about this issue to other sections. But then you say, look, you know, it's not up to me whether you do this, right? I'm not here to twist your arm. Because you want people who want it, right? You don't want to be arm twisting. That doesn't get anybody anywhere. So it's not up to me, but from what you've just told me, and I would summarize why, you know, and then it seems like this might be something you might want to get involved in. We can certainly use your help in your particular expertise. What do you think? Does it make sense? Would you want to try it out? And really ask it as a question. And because then they have the opportunity to really say, no, this isn't what I would be interested in. And you'd rather know that now than to arm twist her and find out after she blows the first couple of things that she had committed to do, right? Because she really wasn't interested in doing it. She just wanted to please you, and she didn't know how to say no. And we've all been there. Maybe we've even been in that spot of not being able to say no and then regretting it later, like I was. So if it makes sense, you want to try it out. And that's the way to proposition, right? Does this make sense to you, or what feels difficult about this way of doing it? We got to hurry because we're going to get into some practicing here, right? So tell me, what's your reaction to this way to proposition? Carol, what do you think? Carol?
Okay, so is somebody else talking? This is Rita.
No. Hi, Rita. Tell us.
Okay, well, the first thing, I don't know if the other sections are large enough to have a director of volunteers. She has an entire interview one-on-one, and then if there are 5 facets of our organization that there's some great or mild interest, then she gives that new member's name to 5 different committee members. Then they interview to see what the comfort level is, what the degree of passion is, what the amount of time is. And so the person gets her feet wet without getting leadership yet, and dabbles in each of the things that are her passions. And that is working so well.
Great. So you mean that if somebody says they don't know what their particular interest is, but they're interested in learning about all the 5 areas, then each of the 5 action team chairs would, quote unquote, interview them?
Right, because we have more than 5 things. We may have 40 things. But, so Becky Brownman will now say, you know what, I'm going to give your name with your permission to these 5 people, because that's where I see your fit from what you're telling me. So Rita Rome gets a call from Promote the Vote, and then I sit and I have coffee with that person, and then she comes to meetings, makes plans, gets involved, gets their feet wet, and maybe a future leader and maybe given a specific job. But
that's interesting. That's exciting.
Yeah.
I just was curious about it because I'm thinking the willingness of that volunteer to go sit with 5 different people before she figures out which is the best fit. I was just curious about that, because I'm thinking if I'm a really busy leader, then I'm not, and maybe it's just because I'm not clear about what I want to do, right? So that is perfect, right, for people who aren't clear yet which of those issues, right, that they would want to be involved in. And the fact that it's working for you all is fantastic.
And the fact that they get to taste it before they know if they want leadership in it. And we've worked that way for years.
That's great. And it's really working well for you then, right?
Right.
Great, great. One thing I'm wondering about, how is an interview different than maybe a relational conversation, like we were just talking about? Like, is finding out these things and you sharing things about yourself, is that the way that the meeting happens usually?
The first interview with our director of volunteers is obviously of a broad scope for her educating. And we do have new member coffees where people come and present what's going on. But the one-on-one with our director of volunteers is a way for Becky to help the person zoom in on areas, period. Okay?
Right. And the one thing about these meetings, and I often don't call them interviews just because it leaves the impression, it may work for your section well, but just to kind of distinguish, when we're interviewing somebody, it's a one-way conversation, right?
Oh, no.
Right. So that's just why the word interview always gives me pause, right? But it's really a conversation where the your director of volunteers is actually sharing about herself as well, right? It's like a two-way conversation, because that's how the relationship building happens, that gets people over time to commit to the organization. It's not just the organizational mission. It's not just having good experiences on the issues that they care about in action teams. It's also the personal connection, right? That these volunteers are making. And so it has like a relational base, which is really great. Any other sections? What are your reactions to this kind of way to recruit leaders?
It looks great. We need a membership chair.
Right. So, so, maybe you could even bring this to the section, even if you didn't want to be membership chair, or maybe you do. But this could be an engagement tool.
Yeah.
Right?
No, that's good.
Yeah. And if you're doing relational work on an ongoing basis, like house meetings or small groups to uncover people's interests and passions, or one-to-one meetings, right? You can even build in these kinds of relational conversations into your programming, right? Every meeting of the organization can start with a 5 minutes, literally a 5-minute turn and talk. You turn to the person in front of you or in back of you, because usually you know the person beside you. Maybe you pick somebody you don't know in the room, and there's a prompt question, share an experience when you took a risk. Was it worth it? What did it cost you? Would you do it again? Who is your hero, and what trait of theirs do you want to embody? There's a million different relational prompt questions, and Lindsay and Ari have a lot of them already and use them. So constantly building relationships is a way to uncover constantly new leaders, right? For cultivation. Okay, so let's get into Ari and I are gonna model here for you, just for about, what time is it? 10 minutes total. So 6 minutes. Does somebody want to give us a signal? Lindsay, can you give Ari and I a signal, me in particular, because I'm leading it, at 6 minutes? I'm going to try to proposition Ari. We'll see if Ari lets me do that. Without giving me too much trouble. I don't know. I guess I better prepare myself, huh? So here's the context. I am starting a new action team, and my name is Jeannie. And what city are we in, Ari? Are we in Texas? No. Yeah.
Sure. Anywhere.
Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's be in Texas. Deep in the heart of Texas. Yeah, I used to live there a long time ago. And so I'm starting a new action team on voter engagement. We haven't had one for a while. And Ari has shown up at a couple of events on other issues. And Ari seems to be interested in voting. And because we had this conversation at the last section event, and Ari told me that voting stuff was of interest, and that that Ari had been involved with League of Women Voters for a while on voter registration, and has done some community service with NCJW. And also does some advocacy with other organizations, but not yet NCJW. And so I'm going to try, my goal here is to get Ari to say, oh my gosh, I can't wait to be on this action. Okay, maybe that's too much. Maybe she'll agree. Maybe Ari will agree, they will agree to be on this action team, okay? So let's give it a try. So Ari, okay, we're going to start counting 6 minutes now, okay? It was so great to see you at the section meeting last week. I hadn't seen you in a while. Yeah.
It was great to see you too. I'm glad we had a chance to connect.
Me too. And I think I didn't mention to you because I didn't know I was going to do it yet. As I may have mentioned, I've been very interested in voter engagement for a while. I had the opportunity to work with some great NCJW organizers in Florida recently. And also some RAC organizers there on re-enfranchising some ex-felons to be able to register to vote and vote in Florida. And I think I didn't tell you about that experience, did I? When we saw each other.
No, that sounds really exciting.
It was very exciting. I haven't had that much contact with ex-felons, actually. But meeting some of them through this campaign and realizing that hearing their stories about it was really feeling like they were invisible and powerless. And it kind of reminded me of my whole experience growing up of feeling always invisible and powerless when my dad, almost lost his job and stuff. And so it got me thinking about voter engagement differently, than just this technical thing of getting somebody to register to vote. And that you told me you were interested in and had done some stuff on vote. And I'm curious about what you've done with League of Women Voters and why this issue is important to you.
Yeah, that sounds like a really powerful experience. I think I like to do voter registration for folks with League of Women Voters for that same issue of I really think voting is one way. It's one voice that we have to really change our communities and to make an impact, and it's really powerful. And I really like talking to folks about how they can go about voting and how to register and all of the technicalities to ensure everyone has that equal opportunity.
Yeah. So where did that passion come from? Like what prompted the interest in particular?
I'm not quite sure. I think I think elections in particular are really meaningful, and really I care a lot about ballot measures. They're really important to me. I think, especially because I don't know how it works in other states, but I know here and in my home state of Minnesota, every vote counts. And so it's really important to me that people have an opportunity to vote on ballot measures.
Have you ever met anybody that didn't have a right to vote for whatever reason, or was blocked from voting because of? Yeah, I
meet folks all the time who either don't vote or who say that they can't vote. And I think one thing that comes up, either folks who aren't citizens or folks who have had their voting rights revoked and for other reasons, it comes up a fair amount, especially when we're doing voter registration. When it gets closer to the election, we go to the state fair, and you kind of cover a whole lot of folks.
Wow. I actually worked on a couple of races in my early organizing, and we lost both times. So I don't know what that tells you. Maybe I wasn't very good at it. I don't know. But once was in Louisiana, and I hadn't realized that the African-American community there had absolutely no power, right? And in some of these communities we went to, they definitely felt that their vote did not matter. And that just broke my heart, you know, that someone would feel so so powerless that, you know, even if they voted, it wouldn't make a difference in their life. And so when you said Minnesota, every vote counts, I'm curious, what does that mean? What did that mean when you were in Minnesota?
Yeah. So one of the very first ballot measures I ever got involved in was, it was around basically like a Proposition 8 to ban same-sex marriage in the Constitution was proposed. Really active in the campaign, and I just remember on election day, votes in Minnesota are frequently decided by like 100 votes.
Oh my gosh, tight,
so,
dead heat. Ooh.
Yeah, and so it was like chaotic of just literally every person being like, we need you to vote. Like, this is critical. We could win by one single vote.
Wow, that is well. Now I get it, why you're interested, in this issue. So what part of voter engagement work do you feel you do best and love doing most?
I really like getting out in the field and talking to folks and getting folks to register. Like, I especially like talking to folks who just turned 18 about they should vote and how they vote and all of those like kind of like more technical side to ensure that really people are going in fully aware of all of their options.
Well, that's great. So, boy, this is good timing, us talking today, because, you know, I've been thinking about pulling together an action team on this, because we have so many opportunities now with the political climate. And I'll tell you, I've been talking to a few other people, but nobody yet, I think, has any kind of expertise like you just articulated in the ins and outs. And I'm thinking that actually that would be a great asset to this action team. And I mean, we're not going to do it though unless we have 5 or 6 people who really see this as something that can be a growth opportunity for them, a way to make a difference in the organization, and that we're able to harness and leverage some of their particular talents. So, but I'm thinking you would be really great for this action team because of what you can bring. And I wanted to see if you're interested.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for thinking of me. It sounds really cool. To be honest, I'm thinking like I'm already really committed with League of Women Voters, doing voter registration. They've already got a thing going, and NCGW is kind of like where I do my community service work.
So I'm wondering, I hear that, and they do great voter registration work, and I'm just wondering if you have an appetite to become more of a leader within NCJW in the full range of issues that we work on, because you seem to be, from our past encounters, that you're not just a one-issue gal, that your interests are beyond narrow. And I'm thinking that this action team within NCJW is going to become a powerful force if we do our work well and we engage our membership well. And so I'm kind of thinking of this action team as more than just around voter engagement. It's around uncovering new leaders, talent scouting for more leaders. And so that's also why I'm thinking of you. So I guess I would like you to consider it, and we don't have to decide it today, because I don't want you to join this action team unless you really want to. I'm not arm twisting anybody. It's not my style. And so I guess I'd like you to think about it a little further, and wondering if we could talk in a couple of days.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. It definitely sounds really cool, and I do love NCJW. There's always like tons of issues that we work on, always been happening, which is why I became a member. So I'll definitely think about it. I'd like to talk more about what you might want to do, or like what that looks like.
Yeah, because we want the action team to shape it. That's the other thing about it, is that I'm not walking in with a program. I'm trying to collect the right leaders to cook something up together. And so so let's have another conversation in a couple of days when you thought about this a little bit more.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. All righty. So wow, she made me work for it, didn't she? Or didn't Ari make me work for it? Wow. So let's just debrief it real quick so we have time for you to get into practice also. So what could I have done better? Is there something I could have said or done to have nailed down that yes Or was it better that I didn't try to nail down the yes and just set up another time?
So I think it was better for you to do what you did, to set up another time and to say you didn't need an answer right away. One of the things that I was concerned about, though, was when Ari initially said, you know, she's devoted to doing this with the League of Women Voters, pivoted and said, well, this is not a single, NCJW is not a single issue item, but the conversation up until then had been talking about voter engagement, and I was under the impression certainly that that's what you wanted to achieve.
So tell me why you think I went to that other place. Why did I try to broaden it beyond just that?
I think you did that so to keep her and to keep Ari engaged and to and to like keep the door open. The door open.
Right.
So I understood it, but I also believe that there is a tension there between accomplishing what you're hoping to accomplish, or creating something where it's a more of a fluid situation, and you can't be sure that what it was that you set out to accomplish is actually going to be accomplished, or you're the one who's going to have to compromise and something else is going to be different. There's a tension between those two things.
There is, yeah. And part of it is a little bit of a stall tactic, right? So I was trying to give myself a couple of minutes to also think about, I was trying to signal Ari that I'm looking at Ari as a leader altogether, right? That we're just, as an organization, we're not just pitching people around only narrow things, but we're also looking at them as leaders, right? And so part of it was that, part of it was a little bit of stalling and trying to figure out whether I was going to further push her or not. And I'm glad I didn't, because, well, why was it good that I didn't try to nail Ari down to an actual yes or no?
Might have said no.
Ari probably would have said no. But Ari, let's hear from you. Would you have said no, or could I have gone a little more?
I think for a really short conversation, I probably would have said no, but I think if we were actually sitting down and having a conversation, I would have asked you more about like what types of things we want to do. And then when you said that, like, oh, we want to shape it together, I would have been like, great, like, who else are you thinking of? What ideas have you heard so far? And then I probably would have agreed eventually.
Yeah, so if a longer conversation, right, we could have probably come to that, but not in 6 minutes, right? Okay, good. Okay, so it wasn't a one-way conversation, right?
Right.
I was coming with, this is why I care about this, right? And I'm really interested in why you care about this, right? And that's really the important part here. So look, I want you to have a chance to do it. It's 2:45. So Ari, can you pair people up for like a 10-minute quick? One of you will pitch the other one, and you'll have to make up what the self-interests are a little bit, and you'll have to probe a little bit for that in that 10 minutes, okay?
Okay.
Yep, I have the breakout rooms ready whenever, just pair up to practice the proposition.
Right. So one of you will proposition the other, and that's all we have time for in 10 minutes.
Yeah, and so folks know what it's going to do. It's going to pause the recording and put you into a private room. I have everyone paired in doubles, and then you'll be able to practice propositioning, folks. And I'll bring everyone back, so don't worry about that either.
Yeah. Okay. That's 5 of. Great. Okay. We'll see you in a bit. Great. Okay, so for those of you that were in a chat room that had somebody to chat with, do you want to share any, just what was that experience like? What did you do well, or what would you have done differently next time? So besides Rita, who she and I did a chat room, who else was in a chat room? that wants to share briefly?
I was in a chat room.
Okay, Carol.
I was the interviewee. Oh no, I was the interviewee. So Beth asked me, you know, what my passions are and why I'm even thinking about coming to a meeting, and you know, so she delved very well into my motivation.
Wonderful. And did you say yes?
I was still on the fence. It went too fast, and then we got into something a little off the track. So,
so you gave her a run for her money, huh?
Yes. Yeah, I was complaining about, you know, not having enough time because of my other commitments.
Right.
How do you handle the other commitment thing? I mean,
yeah. So that's always an excuse that people give, and what I say to them is, you know, we all prioritize what we spend our time on based on some things we have to do. I have to make a living so I can pay for my daughter to go to college. That's a given. But pretty much everything else in my life, I make choices every day about what's really important to me and where I can make the biggest impact in the world or within my family or wherever it is. So I'd encourage you to look at where you are spending your time now, and is it around your passions? And if it's not, then I want you to think about this, because clearly you're passionate about this. And actually that works really well for me. I don't know. Does anybody else have any good tactics around when somebody says they're too busy?
So I think another response is to recognize, acknowledge that, you know, that they are busy, and then you know, say that it's usually people who are busy who get the most accomplished.
Yes, and that is so true. It is so true. Rita, do you want to share briefly what your strategy was with me when I was telling you I wasn't quite sure I had time for this? Where's Rita? Are you there? You're muted.
Now can you hear me?
Yes. So tell your colleagues what you did that worked.
I keep pressing unmute. So I said, I acknowledge that I know you are really busy, but I love that you have such an expertise with the League of Women Voters. I was wondering if you could be an advisory person to share your experience to add to our committee.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I was ready to say no, and she sensed it. Rita sensed that I was going to say no. And rather than have me say no, her strategy was to get me to come to one meeting and share something that I, in particular, it would be a big value added to the team for me to share my experiences from League of Women Voters. And her hope, right, Rita, tell me if I'm saying this right, was that I would get excited by this action team, right? And who else is in the room that I would want to come back. So usually I don't like advisory kind of things or involving people in it, but in this case, it was the only way I was going to say yes. So I thought it was brilliant, Rita. So good job.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to share real quick, because we really have to wrap up in a few minutes. It's not easy, right? But when you proposition a person around their interests, as opposed to just what your agenda is, it's a game changer. And my hope is that you're gonna test some of this out as we go forward. I know Ari wants to take us through a quick brainstorm of learning.
Can I add one more thing?
Yes.
Even if all you did was come to that one meeting, it's still win-win.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because I would have been a little bit more connected to the organization. Yeah. Great.
And we would have learned from you. So go ahead.
There we go.
Thank you.
Sure. Ari, you want to take it over? Ari, are you there?
Oh, hey, yep, sorry.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, we have 2 minutes left, so we're going to go really quick. The last thing I want to flag with this is anytime we're having these conversations and propositioning folks, we like follow up, especially if it's having another conversation of knowing often it's going to be more than one or even 2 conversations with folks to develop leaders. And so prioritizing that. In the last next minute or so, I think we're going to try something new. Usually we send out an evaluation. I'd like to just take a minute though and hear from some folks, what are key learnings that you are taking from this webinar? What really resonated with you or stuck out to you?
This is Leslie Frost. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Good. I didn't know if I was unmuted. It's been extremely interesting. The whole idea that you can be a leader without having a title or position is something I had never thought about before. And the whole idea of leadership being so much more, even down to the smallest thing, like, making sure the coffee's on. It was really interesting, and it sparked a lot of ideas for me.
Thank you.
I think the part about active listening, I've been taking a Wise Aging class, and it talks about active listening. So when you ask the person, what are you passionate about? What have you done in the past? What kind of experiences do you think you can bring to us? Delving into their interests and their passions is very, very key. I know we're very apt to start telling about the wonderful things that NCJW does and is and was and will be, and we forget to actively listen to the applicant or the whatever you want to, the person we're trying to recruit.
Can I
took that away?
So, again, my biggest takeaway is the difference between a committee and an action team.
One more, if anyone has anything.
Meg wanted to say something, I think.
I just wanted to piggyback on something that Carol said that I'm sort of struggling with here in San Diego. I had an evening not too long ago where I had a lot of young people who are all sort of activists in their own right. And we went around the room to kind of share what we were each passionate about. And it's inspiring. And I mean, I certainly had the sense of, yes, well, I've got the right people in the room. I was going to be talking about NCJW. But then I was like, but this is too vast a spread for me and my co-chair to be able to then, create something for everybody, even though all of the areas that were and the arenas that were brought up are things that NCJW cares about. It was just like, no. So I would still like more help in kind of reconciling, being an active listener, understanding that you have to speak to people's passions, and having limited bandwidth in terms of how responsive you can be to everybody.
Yeah, thank you. These are all great learnings that folks had. I want to give a huge, I know that we're a little bit over time. I want to give a huge, huge thank you to Jeannie for joining us again and having this incredible conversation with us.
My pleasure.
It's always such a good time to really dig into how do we develop leaders, how do we build action teams. Before I let folks go, I just want to remind folks of our next webinar. It'll be June 19th, Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. Don't worry, we'll send out emails and everything. You'll get another registration page. Next month will be through our communications and marketing department. Stephanie, our Associate Director of Communications, will be facilitating, and she'll be having a conversation with us of how do we use digital platforms to further our advocacy. So if you have questions around how do we use Twitter or Facebook or email to really continue engaging our membership and driving our advocacy forward, she will be the person to ask. So we're looking forward to that, and we will have the invite for that coming out in the next week or two. So thanks again, everyone, for being able to join us this afternoon. Always appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thanks so much.